Welcome to the Harmony in a Hurry podcast. We are Caroline and Anna, mindfulness enthusiasts, exploring ways to weave a little bit of mindfulness into our busy routine. Welcome to another episode. This week we chat to Rebecca, who is a heart-centered vibrational therapist. She offers a specialized blend of modalities in areas spanning emotional health, mindset, energy healing, spirituality, and somatic processing, amongst others. We hope you'll enjoy it.
Welcome to our Harmony in a Hurry podcast, and thank you very much for coming today and sharing your thoughts on around mindfulness.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
So just to get started, what does mindfulness mean for you personally?
So I'll just kind of preface that by sharing that I haven't actually technically learnt what mindful is through like a practice or through a book or anything like that. So what mindfulness means to me is really about connection and awareness, and not just like an awareness that comes from the mind, but a full embodied awareness that comes through all the senses, and about being present to each moment with awareness through all those senses. Yeah.
So how did you come up to that realization?
To be honest, I think it's something that emerged as a survival skill. So back when I was in my early 20s, I had a few traumatic things happen that really pushed me to experiencing myself in a different way. And through those experiences, this thing kind of emerged through me that kind of guided me back to present moment. When you're dealing with things like flashbacks that just happen spontaneously in a workplace environment, I really had to learn how to just bring myself back into that moment and to connect with the reality of what was happening around me so that I could function essentially. And once having come through that, then mindfulness kind of became something different for me. It was more about accessing this space where I was in active co-creation and awareness, because that was something that enriched my life rather than something that I needed to do to survive. Yeah.
That's a beautiful transition from needing it to then realizing it's actually
Yeah,
that, like you say, enriches my life.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was something that just sort of, in those moments when I needed it, it was almost like instinctive. So it wasn't a tool that someone told me about or a concept that I was introduced to. It's like, I'm having this experience. It's not feeling particularly good. What can I do to support myself in this moment so that I can feel like I'm able to function in society, and also not in a way that created more dissociation, or not in a way to push away uncomfortable thoughts or feelings. It was more about anchoring in the present moment so I could access a part of me that knew. So that was, what it was about in those moments.
So
Yeah.
in those moments, sorry, Anna,
You go.
how did you, especially if you've got a lot of triggers or you're in the workplace, what
Yeah.
did you do to try and bring yourself back to that mindfulness space?
Let's say, for example, I worked in retail, so dealing with lots and lots of customers, managing a team, all sorts of stuff. And let's just say there was a big loud crash noise and I would be in full activation. I would start having flashbacks of things that had happened, and I would feel it all starting to intrude in what was happening in that moment. And so it would just be almost like this voice that would come from somewhere else that would say, just look at your surroundings, notice where you are, pay attention to your breathing. And it was just this guidance that I accessed in the moment that helped me to orient and to reconnect to a sense of safety. And I'm here in this shop with these people. Everything's okay. I'm okay.
So it's almost like, I guess it is encapsulating that it reminds you to bring you back to yourself. So even though that doesn't change what happened, you can
Yeah.
bring yourself back today. And then I suppose if you get home after work and you're still feeling, then you can do what you need to do to try and work through those things.
Yeah.
Yes, really.
Yeah. And I will share as well that the post-traumatic stress that I had at that time was linked to a very direct situation. It was like a car accident scenario. It wasn't like a relationship-related kind of trauma.
Mhm.
And so it would be, I was very aware of what those triggers were, which I think helped, because sometimes when it's more relationship-based trauma, we don't really know where the triggers are. Yeah.
Thank you. Also, did you have a question?
No, I think for me, I find interesting that you could delay that processing, which is fantastic. And so once you went home, what was if you can share it, what was the
Yeah.
practice that you had to release that build up tension of
Yeah.
having relieved that stressful moment?
So this was all very instinctual because the trauma was car accident related. The drive home would always get me into full activation because you can't avoid that situation. So by the time I would get home, I would shake, I would cry, I would whatever. I think the key thing is that I would allow myself to have that experience. And I think that's a really key part of any healing process, is allowing yourself to have that space and to have that time and to have that release, because even though it doesn't feel comfortable, it's, I think, an important part of the process to actually allow that stuff to come out when it's there. And sometimes we don't have the space, but in those instances, I think you just have to get clever about creating it for yourself.
Mhm.
See it as a priority and something that is not only going to help you in that moment, but it'll also help you to have healthier, more meaningful, deeper connections with other people. So not only is it a benefit to you, but it's a benefit to others as well, to give yourself that space.
Very wise.
Yeah.
Very, very wise.
So if you had to say, in which way do you feel that it enhances your life to be mindful or to live mindfully?
Yeah. So I think for me, when I'm in connection and when I'm present to the things that are happening and I have that awareness, it kind of speeds things up in a sense, because you become more mindful of other things and other triggers and other thought processes or beliefs or things that aren't necessarily conducive or helpful to your growth and to cultivating healthy self-esteem. And so the more mindfulness you have, the more aware you are of where your thoughts actually come from. And so you can do a bit of, processing around that to free yourself from those past experiences. But also, every moment becomes like a sacred moment of co-creation. If you're mindful in a full-bodied sense, you're aware of the impact that things are having upon you. So it gives you vital information and allows you to make more informed, healthier choices for yourself. But you also become for me, I become incredibly aware of the impact that I can potentially have on others as well. And that's really important to me, to impact people in a way that benefits and helps them to cultivate their sense of self and their presence of being. Yeah. And it enriches your relationships. If you're working with other people, the more mindful you are of yourself and the way in which you respond to things, the better you can support others in that process for themselves, you know? Yeah. So it's an all round positive experience where every everyone gets to reap the benefits. Yeah. I think too, maybe that does come from the fact that when I was going through a lot of really big things in my life, I really was alone in it. And when you're in immeasurable darkness and you have to somehow try and find a light within yourself, it really pushes you to some extreme places. And I think that's wisdom, isn't it? Like, you don't necessarily get wisdom through consuming information, because wisdom comes from how you digest and apply that information. When you're gaining that knowledge through life experience and through practical application, then wisdom sort of naturally is cultivated, I think. And I think it's about, you get to a place where there's less reactivity. So therefore, again, you're able to make more conscious choices and consciously respond to something, rather than acting from a place where perhaps you're more in fight, flight, or freeze response. So you have more of your faculties, more of your whole self available to choose your response, not in a way that overrides what you're feeling, but in a way that is sort of like, okay, I can feel that this situation has really hurt me and I feel really, really upset. And maybe you even feel angry in that moment, but you're able to, rather than just lashing out and causing more harm, you're able to just sit with that feeling of hurt for yourself, find a way to process it, find a way to work through it without acting it out in a way that inflames the situation and doesn't ultimately get anyone what they want or what they need, which really is probably just a bit of love, you know? Yeah.
That is definitely the running theme with everybody that we have interviewed.
Yeah.
That's it.
And sometimes a feeling can be a little bit misplaced. And what I mean by that is, like, if someone were to look at me in a way that kind of made me feel a bit like, oh, why are you looking at me like that? If I weren't aware of my triggers and my stuff, I might say something inflammatory in that moment, and that's not really, the kindest thing to do or the most appropriate way to handle it. You take things less personally, I think. Yeah.
So anything else that you would like to add that you think is important for people that are entering into a mindfulness journey or exploring a little bit?
I think maybe what I will add is, I mentioned before about the car accident scenario, and what I didn't mention was how that sort of also tapped into my past experiences and unpacked a whole lot of other stuff. So even in those moments where I was aware of those triggers, there was also a whole lot of other stuff that was kind of coming into play. So the mindfulness and the awareness of being able to trace my thoughts and trace my feelings and all of that sort of stuff led to a much deeper process and unraveling within myself. Yeah. Yeah.
Excellent.
Well, thank you so much, Beck, for sharing all of your insights around mindfulness. It's been lovely talking to you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was really lovely to meet you. And thank you for inviting me and for giving me the space to share my perspective.
Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope you gained some insights from this episode. Remember that you can find more information about Rebecca and her offerings in the show notes. See you next week.